Imagine this. Ancient India, during the height of the Gupta Empire, over 1,500 years ago. In a world of flourishing arts and sciences, a new kind of conflict is being conceived, a war fought not on the battlefield but on a board of 64 squares. Here, by flickering lantern light, they gather not to clash swords but to wage a war of the mind. They unroll a board and on it, they place a miniature army carved from wood and ivory. The game is called Chaturanga. In Sanskrit it means four limbs, a direct reference to the four divisions of the Indian army. The infantry marches one square forward, a cautious advance. The cavalry leaps over friend and foe alike, mirroring a horse's agility. The mighty elephants jump two squares diagonally, flanking the enemy, and the chariots charge across the board in straight, powerful lines. At the center of it all is the Raja, the king, whose survival is the ultimate goal. In its earliest forms, Chaturanga was a game for four players, with the roll of a die deciding which piece could move. But as it evolved, the dice were cast aside. Luck was banished, leaving only pure, unadulterated strategy. The battle was no longer one of chance, but of intellect. From the heart of India, the game embarked on a grand journey carried along the bustling trade routes of the Silk Road. It arrived in Sasanian Persia around the 6th century, where it was embraced with passion. The Persians adapted its name to Shatranj and began to refine its rules. The game became a two-player contest. The Raja became the Shah, or king, and the cry, Shah Mat, the king is ambushed, gave us the word we use today, checkmate. The pieces evolved. The king's advisor was now a much weaker precursor to the modern queen, able to move only a single square diagonally. The game was slower, more methodical, a patient siege rather than a swift assault. After the Arab conquest of Persia, the game flourished throughout the Islamic Golden Age. It was no longer just a pastime, it was a science and an art form. In the great intellectual centers like Baghdad, caliphs and scholars alike were captivated. Great masters emerged, like Al-Adli and his successor, As-Suli, who was considered the strongest player in the world for decades. They wrote the first comprehensive books on chess, analyzing openings and composing intricate chess problems known as. These weren't just puzzles, they were works of art, celebrated for their beauty and ingenuity. The game, carried by Arab traders and conquerors, spread across North Africa and finally crossed the Mediterranean into Europe, arriving through Moorish Spain and Sicily. In medieval Europe, it found a home in dimly lit castles and quiet monasteries. The church was initially suspicious, sometimes banning it as a distraction or a form of gambling, but its strategic depth was undeniable and it soon became accepted as the king's game, a noble pursuit that taught tactics, foresight, and discipline. Then, around the end of the 15th century, a revolution. The rules underwent a dramatic transformation. The game, as Europe knew it, was about to get much, much faster. The Humble was reborn as the Queen, a piece of immense power, combining the moves of the rook and the bishop. Some historians link this change to the rise of powerful female monarchs of the era. The bishop also gained its modern, sweeping diagonal range, and pawns were granted the option of a two-square advance on their first move. This new version, sometimes called Mad Queen's Chess, transformed the game. Openings became critical, attacks became swift and brutal, and the board exploded with tactical possibilities. The modern game of chess had been born. Fast forward through the Enlightenment to the bustling cities of 19th century Europe. Chess clubs and cafes became intellectual hubs where the best players gathered to test their mettle. This was the Romantic era of chess. Players favored daring attacks and brilliant sacrifices above all else. Its greatest champion was the American prodigy Paul Morphy, a genius who blazed across the European scene in 1858. Defeating every master who faced him with breathtaking ease, only to abandon the game just as quickly. He was the pride and sorrow of chess. But the Romantic era gave way to a more scientific approach, pioneered by Wilhelm Steinitz. He argued that attack was not enough. True mastery lay in positional understanding, in pawn structures, weak squares, and accumulating small, lasting advantages. In 1886, he defeated Johannes Zukertort in the first official World Chess Championship, becoming the father of modern positional chess. The 20th century ushered in an age of legends, titans whose names are spoken with reverence. There was José Raúl Capablanca, the Cuban chess machine, a natural genius who seemed to see the truth of a position with a single glance. He was followed by the fiery attacker Alexander Alekhine, and Mikhail Botvinnik, the patriarch of the dominant Soviet school of chess, who treated the game with rigorous scientific discipline. Then, in 1972, at the height of the Cold War, the world was transfixed by the match of the century. The enigmatic American prodigy, Bobby Fischer, single-handedly took on the entire Soviet chess empire, defeating Boris Spassky in a dramatic showdown in Reykjavik that was as much about geopolitics as it was about chess. Fischer's reign was short, but his legacy paved the way for the game's most enduring rivalry, Anatoly Karpov versus Garry Kasparov. For over a decade, these two opposites battled for supremacy. Karpov, the cool, positional python, slowly squeezing the life from his opponents, and Kasparov, the dynamic, aggressive force of nature, overwhelming the board with energy and calculation. But a new challenger was emerging, one made not of flesh and blood, but of silicon and code. In 1997, Garry Kasparov sat down to face IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue. When the machine won, it was a watershed moment. Humanity's greatest champion had been defeated. The game would never be the same. Yet far from ending the human element, computers became an essential training tool, giving rise to a new generation of universal players. Viswanathan Anand of India, the tiger from Madras, brought the world title back to Asia, and then came Magnus Carlsen, a Norwegian prodigy who dominated the modern era with a style that blended human intuition with computer-like precision. The story doesn't end there. The internet arrived, and chess exploded. Platforms like Chess.com and Lichess connected millions of players across continents anytime, anywhere. Grandmasters became streamers, sharing their genius on Twitch and YouTube, making the game more accessible than ever. Then, in 2020, Netflix dropped The Queen's Gambit. Suddenly, chess was cool, a cultural phenomenon, a new generation, inspired by the drama, the genius and the timeless beauty of the game, flooded the digital boards. From ancient battlefields to Persian courts, from smoky cafes to global digital arenas, chess has always been more than a game. It is a mirror of human history, a canvas for artistic creativity, and a laboratory for scientific thought. It's a test of wits, patience, and courage. It's a story of empires, of legendary rivalries, and of the personal struggle for improvement that every player, from the curious beginner to the world champion, understands. From chariots to Carlsen, the journey continues, one move at a time.